Welcome back to the Game or Die podcast. I am your host, Ryan Moore, and today I'm going to be talking about several games, but I'm going to be doing something a little bit different this time. I am trying to not fix my audio, but I am changing my audio up in the studio for work, and in the process of that, I have some new equipment that I wanted to test out, and so I figured instead of doing it live, while I'm working, I can actually do that with my podcast, record several different microphone setups and even room setups. So that's what I'm going to be doing right now, is I'm going to be using the first microphone, which is a Rode Pod mic. And there's no processing or anything like that. I'm just recording directly onto the Rodecaster, and then I'm going to actually change actual rooms into the studio itself. I'm in the editing bay right now, and then I'll be in the studio. I also have the air conditioner going, a couple fans going. It's pretty hot. It's around 90 degrees outside. It's a nice brisk 76, I think, inside. So who knows how hot it's going to get, but I wanted to test this out. I can hear myself pretty well. No real big issues there, but I did want to talk about some video games. I haven't done a podcast in about a month and a half, somewhere around there. It's been ridiculously busy at work. It's our kind of busy schedule, and I just want to talk about video games. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I played a few video games over the last month and a half, and the first one that I want to talk about is TearDown. This is a game that came out of early access about a month ago, and it is a game where you are, like the title says, tearing down stuff. And it's actually really interesting because it's all made of voxels. Voxels are basically squared, three-dimensional squares, like pixels. Instead of things being polygonal, it is pixel-based, and they're called voxels. They're like boxes, virtual boxes, I believe is where it actually gets the term voxel. And it is almost like Minecraft in a way. Everything is a square in the world, and then the world is built out of those tiny little squares. It is not like Minecraft where there's no objectives and you kind of just do whatever you want to do. It is actually really, really interesting. So the whole premise of TearDown is you are some unnamed character. Like every game nowadays, your character has no name, and you're supposed to self-identify with a character with no name. I don't understand that. But you have no name, and you are coming, like the game literally starts with you getting off a bus and walking to this, like almost not abandoned, but like pretty run-down factory. And you open up the gate, you open up the door to the factory, you sit down at the computer, and your mom is saying hi to you through an email. So you sit down at the computer, you get this email from your mom, and she's like, hey, hope you had fun on your vacation. Our business is really struggling. And if you can find any work to drum up some business, to help pay some bills, that would be really, really helpful. So your random unnamed character owns or is part of a family business where you are a demolition company. And that's kind of where the name of the game TearDown comes from, is you're demolishing, you're tearing down stuff. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I went, okay, cool. So family business. All right, got it. I need to find some, customers to demolish buildings and get paid. So you get an email from a guy, and he says, hey, I work for the local mall, and I want you to tear down this building. But we're kind of having some troubles with paperwork, but don't worry about it. That's my thing to deal with. I just want you to go to this building. Please do it late at night, around midnight. Make sure you're not seen, and just go tear down that building. I'll pay you really well. Don't ask questions. I was like, okay. So you go, you have no option, obviously. So you go do this, and you tear down this just really quick building. And it was kind of hard because when you start out the game, you only have a couple different tools to tear down buildings. And you have a sledgehammer and I think like a torch. I can't remember if you unlock that later, and like a flashlight and something else like a rope, or I honestly can't remember. It was a while ago since I played this, and it's very basic. So it took me like 10 minutes to kind of figure out how to tear this building down. And one of the issues that I did see some people really kind of gripe about with it is the physics are definitely not realistic. If you have a single voxel pixel holding up a building, so you got three corners, all the walls except for one tiny little piece that is still attached to the foundation, the entire building is still held up until you knock down the last remaining corner, the last tiny little corner. The weight of the building has no effect on the physics at all. So you can have something, this big, gigantic building being completely demolished on all the corners except for one tiny little pixel that is still attached to the ground, and it will float in midair. And that is where a lot of people were like, that sucks, that's stupid, it should be physics based. And it kind of is in certain ways, but that definitely is not. So it kind of, it made me really try and not just second guess, but really trying to figure out how can I make this building fall down in a quick way. And there were like fire canister. There's some explosive canisters lying around a building site, just down the street a little bit across the way. And so what I did is I actually picked up these explosives, hurled them at the building, and they exploded and exploded, and the building caught on fire. And fire actually catches and spreads too, which was really cool. So I let the building spread, and the fire spread throughout the building. The building burned down except for the chimney. And then I had to toss more explosive to demolish the chimney because, again, like that voxel thing, like the whole building was demolished except for the voxels. And to break down the bricks took a little bit longer than I wanted it to, or I don't think I could have with the starting weapon. I can't remember. But it was basically like, crap, I got to figure out how to take down this fireplace or this chimney without, with different tools. So I blew it up. I finished that and I went, okay, cool. The level ended, and then it was like, okay, great. And then you show back up at your, facility where you're staying, your company's business location where you live, I guess. And you turn on the news, and the news is like, hey, some vandalism happened last night near the mall. The local historical library building was demolished somehow by an unknown assailant. And the cops are pursuing him, and they think they got some leads. So you basically did something you weren't supposed to do by the guy who contracted you to do it. So it's all like, under the table, like pretty shady business. A cop contacts you by email and says, hey, look, I can't prove it yet, but I know you were the one who did this stuff. We have security footage with your van's name on it, but we can't prove that you did it. But instead of prosecuting you, I need you to do something for me. And the whole game kind of acts like this, where you turn into this hardcore criminal where you vandalize, blow up, steal, destroy other people's businesses and lives, and you're just doing it because you don't want to get caught yourself or something. Like, it kind of makes no sense, and it just escalates and escalates and escalates, and it's like, this is a pretty stupid story. Like, I really kind of hated the story as soon as it started catching on, and I caught on to where it was going. I was like, wait, what? Why am I a criminal all of a sudden? And I unfortunately too, like, your character doesn't have a name, it doesn't have a voice, you have no say in anything. You just click on the button that says, okay, I'll do it, to start the mission. But and you have objectives and all that, and I'll get into that in a minute. But it was really weird to see your character, which again, when video games do this, when they want you to like fill the shoes and the role of that character and take on the persona of that character, I should be able to second guess what the heck is going on. I am not just gonna blindly follow some dude who says, hey, I want you to demolish this building in the middle of the night and make sure you're not seen. And if you look at any signs that says, hey, please don't demolish this building, it's a historical artifact, just kind of disregard those. Those aren't real. Like, no, of course I'm going to second guess what the heck is going on. Of course I'm going to feel really weird about doing this shady business. But your character just blindly follows whatever the email says. And it's really, 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 really stupid. And you have no say in the matter, which I kind of get. I mean, obviously the story in the game wouldn't progress unless you did this stuff. But in that case, your character should start voicing concerns. You should be able to like click a button and send them an email saying, look, I don't feel good about this. And then there should have been some storyline where the cop basically deputizes you or something along the lines of that fact, where you have some authority in and a say in the matter, which is just so bizarre to me. It was just so weird to see this character not do anything other than say, okay. And especially when you get through the story, you are destroying people's lives. You're destroying their family heirlooms, their family businesses, and you have a family business. And every time you complete a mission, or at least a couple missions, you're building your family business, the building grows and becomes better, and you're raking in all this dough, and it's just like, you're a freaking scumbag. And I hated that part of making my character just be a dirty, low-life criminal. When you start out, you don't feel like that, but immediately you get, and it's not even like, hey, you're thrust into this like a Grand Theft Auto where you're already in part of the lower levels of society. You are an upstanding young citizen, and you immediately turn immediately to the dark side. You are Darth Vader instantly the moment you start the game, after you walk through the business of your company. It's weird and it's bizarre. So the story really sucks. And the gameplay is really, really fun up to a point. The first few levels, I was having a blast walking around this. It's not open world, but it is a large map that you get to play around in. And like demolishing that first, local museum library building, and kind of just playing around with the physics of the world and the level and all that. It was like, hey, this is really cool. Like, I really like destroying this stuff. And that's kind of what I saw when I was trying to learn about this game several months ago. Like, I think probably about last year. I remember seeing it on Steam and going, ooh, that game looks pretty interesting. I don't know if I want to spend $20 on a early access game though right now. I think it was like 20, $30. And I am way more wary of early access games than I was just, a couple years ago. Early access to me is something that is kind of cool in theory, but I don't actually want to play early access games unless I know that it's going to be finished very soon. And at that point, I'm saying unless I know that it's going to be finished at all, because there are so many early access games that start and then never really finish up, or just they promise the moon and then you get dirt. You get nothing as what was promised. So I really try to talk to myself into saying, you know what, you don't need this right now, Ryan. You don't need to be able to buy this right now. You can wait. And so I waited on this game, and the videos that I watched, the reviews that I saw and read, really, really made this game sound awesome. And when I started playing it, I went, hey, this is exactly what I was promised. This is exactly what the game seemed like, and I was having a blast. And then the game flips a dial to the way the stages are set, the way the levels play out. So you have your character, your scumbag character who just does all the dirty work, and you're going back and forth between these like millionaire, landlords, where one has a business, the other has a business, and you're playing both sides really. And it's that part is kind of interesting, but again, I just don't like how neither of them kind of pick up that they both are hiring you to destroy both of the other's buildings. And it's really stupid and short-sighted, because if you think about the story logically for even a moment, or the things that are happening, it's like, who wouldn't pick up on this? Come on. So I I was going through the game, and the game switches on you where you are hired to do the job, destroy this building for this guy, to get back at the other guy. And there's now alarms in place. And the alarms have a 60-second timer for you to accomplish all the goals. So if let's say, one of the first levels, you have to basically steal 3 safes and get them on a boat that's right near the entrance and get away within 60 seconds of sounding the alarm. So the whole design of this game changes to where you explore at your leisure all the buildings and all the surrounding in the map, and kind of map out like an escape route. And it almost becomes a heist game in a way. And it's like really, really interesting. But the timing window of that 60-second timer is so tight that, and the way the game is designed, and I'll talk about this in a second, is just so stupid that you're like, oh, come on. Like, you should be able to play around and expand some of this stuff a little bit. So you spend as much time as you wanted. And there was times where I spent like 30, 45 minutes in the level before I sounded the alarm. And luckily you can save your state basically. And if something goes wrong in the heist and you get captured within that 60-second time limit, you can just reload the state. So like right before you start the heist portion, where you start sounding the alarm, because the alarm always has to be set off. That's another weird thing, is the alarm is always going to be set off by the objectives that you're given. It just kind of sucks. So I would spend so much time kind of mapping everything out and trying to figure all this stuff out. And I would sound the alarm and start stealing the items. And, I think it was like 3 or 4 times where I just kept running into random issues, whether the physics of the world didn't play out right, or I just made a mistake, or I couldn't pick up an item. Picking up items are just like the absolute worst when you're using a controller. I didn't realize this. The controller design is not perfect in the game, which super sucks, because I don't play mouse and keyboard when I play video games unless I absolutely have to. This is one of those games where you kind of absolutely have to, which sucks. So I would do all this stuff with the heist portion. I'd set off the alarm, I'd get stuff, I'd lose, I'd reload my save 3 or 4 times, and then I just kind of got mad and angry about how the game was designed. I was just like, this isn't fun. This is not what I wanted out of the game. Everything beforehand is super, super fun. But as soon as the game turns into this objective, steal this over here, steal that over here, bring them all to this central location and escape within 60 seconds, and the map is huge, it is just like, well, now you got to think outside of the box. And that's actually pretty cool to be able to think outside the box and approach the objectives different ways to achieve the same result. That's cool. But when it is such a tight window that it doesn't make a lick of difference half of the time, that you're still barely, barely escaping with like a literal quarter of a half a second, like literally like 5 thousandths of a second left, like skin of your teeth, like that doesn't make you feel real. It didn't make me feel really good anyways. And then this is the stupidest part of all. The alarm sounds, you have 60 seconds to, escape with all the material that you're trying to steal. In that 60 seconds, the alarm sounds, you're running around trying to steal everything and load it up into your boat or load it up into your car. And a police helicopter is coming. You can hear the sirens, you can hear the helicopter blades. Within about the 30-second mark, the police helicopter is approaching. You can actually see it in the distance. So you have 30 seconds before the police helicopter basically arrives on scene. And within those last 30 seconds, I'd say about the last 20, 25 seconds, the helicopter is pretty much right over you, watching everything that you do. You just have to get to the exit point. And when you get to the exit point, you escape and you watch this little, 5-10 second cutscene play out. The helicopter, the police helicopter that's watching everything happens, is watching you do this, get in the car, escape in the cutscene. The spotlight's right on it, and it says, "Hey, you've escaped. You weren't seen." And it's like, no, the cutscene clearly shows that you were watched the entire time. There was absolutely no way that the police just said, "Oh, he's within, he hit the timer, so I guess that wasn't our guy," even though he was running around with sledgehammers and bombs and escaping the scene of the crime. And he ran off as soon as we showed up. Clearly, that's not our guy. Like, it just, again, in the world of this video game, it just makes no sense. And it was such a bummer to see that. I was like, come on, that's so stupid. Think about this stuff. There's such a better way to make this work. And again, the time limit just really, really hinders the enjoyment of the game, which is the playing around aspect, the sandbox aspect, which I normally don't enjoy in video games. But this game, for whatever reason, really, really made me enjoy this stuff. And so I got through like maybe a quarter of the game. The game's actually fairly decently long, but I got through about a quarter, almost halfway through the game, and I just was about to give up. And there is mods that are allowed in the game, like actual Steam Workshop mods, or even game developer mods as well. The developers actually allow you to kind of add in some mods, or I just call them cheats, because that's basically what they are. And these mods really allow you to open up the world a little bit more and have a lot more fun with the world in a way that made the game so much more enjoyable. So, like I said, about half of the way through the game, I turned on some of these mods and I just went, oh, okay, this is so much more enjoyable. I can play around still in the world and then have an easier time with the actual unfun portion, which is you have to do this in 60 seconds. And even though the cops are literally watching you escape, you still escaped. Like, it's like, come on. So some of the mods are actually kind of ridiculous and goofy, but some of them are actually cool. There's a jetpack that just enables you to maneuver around the world a lot easier. There are definitely some buildings that you just need to get up high, and to get up high takes a lot of coordination and planning, and just to be able to jetpack up this little tiny hill instead of having to go around a gate and jump up and blah blah blah. It just made everything so much easier, and to also get a bird's eye view of the levels sometimes at the beginning really did help to get a lay of the land, to be able to see, oh, that's where the first thing I need to hit is. Here on the other side of the map, on the left right hand side, is where I need to get the second portion of my objective. So okay, cool. Now I got a mental and not just a mental image, but I can actually see where I need to go and kind of the route that I should plan out. And then there are some mods that give you new tools. I saw some people have like these crazy lightsabers and these katanas that basically do these big area attacks. Um, I used what was called the Omni tool. And the Omni tool is basically like this laser that you can set the width and distance and length. And basically, you hold down the button, carve out a shape in front of you, and then you let it go, and it blasts out and just continues on for however long you set it for. So if you wanted to create a big cylindrical circle that drills through the entire building, you turn on the Omni tool, you draw a circle, uh, and then set the width to like 100% or something. So it just bores this big circle throughout the entire building. You let it go, and it just goes like a drill. It's a really interesting tool to be able to see in action. What I did is I basically used it as kind of a laser, and they actually have a laser mod as well, but the laser basically is set depth, and it burns everything. And when you come in contact with wood and fire, the fire, like I said, sets. And a lot of buildings later on have these smoke detectors. And so anytime your fire gets out of control, a smoke detector goes off, and if it reaches a certain threshold, then the level gets compromised. I think the cops get called. You basically have to manage the fires as well, and so it's just another little hindrance where it's like, oh, come on. I want to have fun with this game. Stop putting these hindrances on, or at least let me play around with them. Let me have the option to turn them off. After I finished the game, I did realize that there are modifiers to the actual difficulty. I didn't even really look at them because it was like I already beat the game. I'm not going to go back to it. But they are there, and it's actually pretty cool that they did that. However, like I said, with the Omni tool, I could set the depth and everything. So I kind of basically used it as a lightsaber and there's an option with it where it says this Omni tool will not catch fire, or fire will not catch, or whatever. So I toggled that on, and I basically used it to carve out things like a lightsaber almost, like a light gun. And that allowed me to just quickly move through areas instead of having to knock down little tiny sections and just take a lot longer. It helped me open up the playing aspect of it a little bit more, which was really enjoyable. So doing that, like, the game definitely escalates to the point where there's a part 1 and part 2, and I thought part 2 was really pretty bad and boring for the most part. It goes into this whole super villain aspect where your character, one of the guys that you that you were working for, is basically a super villain, and he has all these robots that become death robots, and then he creates this like death robot machine where your mom and the cop that was blackmailing you is basically being held hostage, and you have to the final level is so weird. It kind of comes out of nowhere, and it's basically Blast Core from the N64, from Nintendo 64, like one of the launch window games, Blast Core from Rare. This game takes inspiration from. So you have like this giant death ray machine that is on a collision course, and you have to basically clear out everything in its path so that instead of colliding with a building and blowing the town up, you clear out the area and it falls into the sea, and somehow that doesn't blow the town up. Super weird, super dumb, but it was interesting to say the least. I went, hey, this is like Blastcore, and I actually like that game a fair amount too. Now I kind of want to go play it after this. But it's really, really interesting. I had a really fun time just being able to play through this whole section of this game. So part two kind of sucks, but part one was actually pretty fun once I added the mods in and started kind of alleviating some of the hindrances of that, time limit. And the time limits are always there. And again, as far as I know, as far as I played through, there was no way to get rid of the 60-second timer at the end, or play around with it and add more time to it. It just is that, and there's no way of changing it as far as I know. But I still had a lot of fun with it for the majority of the time. If I was recommending someone this game, I would say get it on sale for like 10-15 bucks is a great price for that game. 20-25 bucks, I don't know about. And I don't know how much game prices are anymore. Like, they fluctuate so much and so often that, there's no reliable way to say, oh, this game costs this much, because again, it could be on sale when I bought it and I remember how much I bought it for, but whatever. It doesn't really matter. The fact is, if I was going to recommend it, I'd say get it fairly cheap. It doesn't need to be a crazy expensive game. And then also, when you're playing through the game, like, add mods. There's no shame in playing this game with mods turned on, because it is such a hindrance in some of those types of things. And TearDown, I just looked it up, is about 20 bucks. So I think I got it for $17 with maybe like a Steam coupon, or not a coupon, Steam wallet money that I got from selling stupid stickers or whatever. It's a good game. It is a fun, decent game. It just sucks that alarm system heist portion was such a big, like, that really is the game. I'd say probably out of all the levels I played, about 85% are that style of do the heist. It's a heist game. It's not a physics teardown game at all, even though the videos that I saw and the reviews and all that stuff really led me to believe this game was basically like, Minecraft, but instead of building stuff, you're tearing stuff down. It's a really, really interesting game, though, and I hope either they fix some of those things for other people in an update. The game, oh, I didn't even say this, I think. So the game was in early access, and the reason I played it is because it came out of early access. It was a 1.0 release, and I went, I have nothing really else to play right now. Why don't I buy this and play it? I've been wanting to play it, and the whole thing of why I haven't played it yet is because I said I wanted to wait until 1.0. It's 1.0, so now I'm going to play it, and I did, and I enjoyed it for the most part. I think the stuff that it does pretty well. But there are some aspects where I go, dude, why was this decision made? Why did you stick to this heist, idea so heavily? And why is it 60 seconds? And why does the cops watch me drive away and then do nothing about it? Like, just tweaking some of those things. Instead of 60 seconds, depending on the level and depending on the objectives, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, Stuff like that would really, really help. But there are just some levels to this game where I was like blown away. There is a portion of the level where it's a thunderstorm, and I was in a jetpack too, and so like I was using the jetpack mod, and this thunderstorm is happening, and I'm going towards the first objective, and the objective, like I think it's steal, this guy's safe and throw it in the ocean. So I fly up to the second story where the safe is, instead of like going on the ground, tearing out part of a corner and going under some crates and stuff like that. I just fly up to the second story window and bash it open. But as I was approaching the building, it's a thunder and lightning storm. Lightning strikes the building and blows part of it up, and it's actually supposed to happen because I recreated it multiple times, and I watched when I got to this section, lightning would always hit and strike that building, kind of like Back to the Future, right? So I was like, oh man, that was crazy. And then there's also, like I said, the physics are a little weird in this game. There are physics, but it is not consistent with the weight of the buildings. So there's a whole level where tornadoes are happening, and I'm just gonna kind of leave it at that because let your imagine go wild with what this game could probably do. If you want go look up videos of this, teardown, um, teardown and tornadoes, and you'll see like these levels are actually really creative. It's a bummer that they stuck on some of those ideas a lot longer, and some of the more fun ideas I think they didn't spend enough time with. The tornado level takes a while, and it is egregious in how long it is, but it's still definitely worth it. And I really wish that they would have just kind of added maybe a little bit more to some of that stuff. But it's a really, really cool game. Like I said, like if that was $10, it would be an absolute, you need to buy this, put the mods on, and you will have a blast 100%. For $20, I could see people having a really fun time with it, and then maybe playing it for maybe 2 hours and then never loading it up again. $20 is a little bit steeper for what that game actually is. But you always got to think about, like, the creators involved, how much time they put into this project. If it's a project that is helmed by one person, or just a tiny group of people, which it seems like this game is, a more indie style, a classic indie style type of game, I go, you know what? $20, who cares? I definitely got my money's worth out of that game. So I highly suggest Teardown, with the caveat that you put on mods and go in knowing it's a heist game. It is not Minecraft, but destroying stuff instead of building stuff. It is absolutely not that game. It is a heist game where you have destructible environments that you can play around in, but the heist portion kind of sucks. Play around in the open world sandbox area, you're going to have a blast. And especially with the mods, holy crap. I watched Nextlander do some modding, and I was like, oh yeah, I did that. And then they started kind of going to the extreme. There's a whole like Titanic level that they played. It's just like, dude, they made a really intricate model of the Titanic in this game. Like, that's not a easy feat to do. It is not something that you can spend an hour doing. That's dozens of hours of building, probably. I don't know the Titanic very well, but it definitely had multiple levels. And I remember playing through a mod for Left 4 Dead, I think Left 4 Dead 2, where they did a Titanic Left 4 Dead mod. And I was like, oh man, this is crazy. Kind of the same thing. There's objectives and all that. It's mind-blowing. But that's Teardown. It is a really, really interesting game. I highly suggest at least looking it up and seeing if it's something that you might find enjoyable, because I definitely did. I just wish that it was a little bit more to the open to the player playing and exploring stuff, as opposed to, do this hardcore. You have to do this. You have to do it this way. But that is the first game that I want to talk about. I got a couple other games I want to talk about, but like I said, I'm doing a little bit of an experiment. So I'm going to play a little bit of music, maybe from TearDown or maybe from the next game that I'm about to talk about. And you will hear about that game right after the break. So enjoy this music, and I'll be back with a new microphone and setup. All right, welcome back to the Game or Die podcast. So this is part 2 of this podcast where I've changed microphones. Now I am using a Rode NT1A in a separate room. I'm actually in my recording studio for videos, my video production studio for work, and also for podcasting and streaming and stuff like that too. So I'm just testing stuff out and having some fun here. I don't remember. I think there's actual processing on this channel. So we're going to play around with it. We're going to see how it goes. The next game that I want to talk about is Cyberpunk 2077. This is a pretty infamous game at this point. There's a lot of issues when this game came out with the older the older versions of the hardware. Microsoft's Xbox One X and the PS4 versions, when those came out, they were infamously bad. And I totally get why, dude. The hardware is almost a decade old, and they're trying to run this new next-gen console game on that hardware, and it was a mess, and it's unfortunate too. Now, I have a little bit of history with this game, more the fact that when the game came out, I was really excited about it, more because it was CD Projekt Red, who are known for the Witcher games. That's how I know about them, and that's what I loved about them. And when this game got announced, like a long time ago, I wasn't really into Cyberpunk. I never have been, and I still am not. I'm not a big Cyberpunk guy. When this game started getting shown off several years ago, I was wary at best. I did not really care for the visual style, the futuristic setting, any of that type of stuff. It's just not my bag, baby. So I really was not looking forward to this game. As the game started to hit that, pre-release cycle, and all the news was coming out about it, Keanu Reeves was in the game at E3, and I was like, I'll try it. It's CD Projekt Red. They made The Witcher, so they had I had an invested interest just because of the reputation that CD Projekt Red had. Now, when The Witcher came out as well, that game, a lot of people had issues with that game when it was coming out. When it first released, a lot of people were having, bug issues and technical issues, the game not running well. I never had those problems. I played through The Witcher, and I never had a big issue with that game running. I think the only actual issue I ever had was the text on the screen when you were looking at items, like item descriptions and things like that. It was so hard to read when I was projecting it on a projector on a wall with the resolution that I was running at, like I believe it was 1080p. This resolution was just too small. And I actually had Patrick Klepek, when he was working at Kotaku, he wrote an article and he used one of my, um, either it was a tweet. I don't think it was a tweet because I didn't really tweet. I don't use Twitter really much at all. So I don't think it was a tweet, but he used a line. Maybe it was a Reddit post or a NeoGAF post or something. And he used one of my lines in his article as a reference. So I thought that was pretty fun. But it really doesn't matter because I didn't have an issue with The Witcher when it came out. So I wasn't really expecting anything on the scale of what happened with Cyberpunk when it got released in 2020. Now, like I said, I kind of have a history with this game. And the reason why is because when that game came out, I think it's December 11th of 2020, I was one day out from heading to Tennessee to find a house. So that game came out. I played it on launch day for about 5-6 hours. And I did have some characters T-pose, walking down the street or something, and you just see a T-posed character running down the street. I did see some characters clip through vehicles, but nothing absolutely egregious to where it broke gameplay. It was just graphical issues that were kind of ashamed to see, just because like this game was one of the biggest hyped games of all time on the scale of something like No Man's Sky, like probably even bigger, honestly, because it wasn't from an indie studio. It was from the team that made the Witcher games. And the Witcher has exploded in popularity at the time too. So I definitely was looking forward to it and seeing the technical issues that game had. It was a big bummer, to say the least. So I played several hours of it, and then the next day I was going to hop on a plane, but we actually ended up driving across the country, staying in Tennessee for longer than I expected, and trying to find a house. We found a house like a month later, and at the end of January, we started moving in 2021. And at that time, I had to pack up my computer and move it across the country. And I was doing a lot of flying back and forth, driving back and forth, all that type of stuff to be able to move. And that game just kind of got put on hold for a while. It's a bummer, but it's just the way it happened. So I saw it. I saw what was going on with it, and in the back of my mind, I went, maybe this is more of a blessing to not have to worry about this game, and I can play it later on when the game gets fixed. Unfortunately, over a year went by before I picked up the game again. It was our Game of the Month game for April and of 2022. So it was over a year before I picked that game back up. And when I picked it up, I still noticed definitely some technical issues, some glitches. The game's huge, and with these big, massive games, there's always going to be bugs. I mean, every game has bugs in it. It's just the way games are developed now. You can cry about it all you want, but it's just a matter of fact. And most bugs don't really give me a big issue. I never really have a big issue with, random graphical errors or glitches. Sometimes they're absolutely hilarious and I love them. Like the Red Dead Redemption 1 glitch that I came across when the game was coming out. I'm sure I've told it on this podcast before, but if you want a clip of Andrew and I playing Red Dead Redemption, we came across a carriage and a horse that was just vibrating and bouncing up and down And it was just like the funniest thing in the world. It was before the game actually got released. So I recorded it, I put it on YouTube. It was one of my first YouTube clips I think I put online. Unfortunately, I don't have access to the actual account anymore. But if you look up Red Dead Demonic Horse on YouTube, that's the clip of Andrew laughing his mind off, uh, and I playing that game. Angry Joe used it in a clip on his Red Dead Redemption review as well. It's just weird all around. Anyways, that has nothing really to do about Cyberpunk, but I thought it was apt because when I come across those glitches, I don't go crazy over them. I don't get on the internet and start complaining how this is an unplayable game because a character is T-posing and walking down the street, or even 10 of them are. You know, it's a video game. They're gonna have glitches. That's just how games are made now. They don't have they've grown so large in scope. You just don't have the QR power and team necessary to facilitate getting all these glitches down, especially for a game that came out at such a time where studios were delaying games inevitably. Studios were pushing games out when they barely could even get them developed to begin with. So I take everything with a grain of salt. I go, you know what? It's not going to be perfect. That's okay with me, as long as the core gameplay experience is there. And when I finally did load up Cyberpunk again, I was debating back and forth of whether or not I should play through the game or like replay the actual beginning, because like I said, I got like 5 or 6 hours into that game in 2020 when it came out on launch day, and then didn't pick it up for a year. I didn't know who anyone was. I didn't know how the game controlled. I didn't really remember much of anything other than a guy with a really cool design. And that's one of the things that I really like about this game is the designs are phenomenal. And I guess, and I'm assuming that's why a lot of people really latched onto it, the cyberpunk design, which I really don't care for. But man, there is this character at the beginning of the game that you get in a confrontation with. You're basically like doing a drug deal type of thing. And he has his entire face like straight up caved in and missing. And it is replaced by cybernetics, robotic parts. And just the way that he looks and the design of the character and how intense that moment is in the game just really sold me on wanting to play through the game. So when we decided to do it for our Game of the Month club on the Couch Money Discord, again, you can follow the link up on the podcast or Discord the link on gameordie.net on the website. You can follow us there and kind of join in having some pretty fun conversations about video games and gaming websites and what used to be video game websites. But man, Cyberpunk, I just didn't think I was going to get into it. But when I played that scene, I was just like, man, I'm really enjoying this. Like, if nothing else, the world building of that game is really drawing me in. So I wanted to play it. And then when we made it our Game of the Month, I was super excited. But I was going back and forth of, should I play this or should I wait? And I decided to play through it. Like, just keep continuing my save. And the reason why is because that first night that I picked it back up, I did a live stream of it. And I played about 2.5 hours, almost, I think maybe 3 hours of the picking up of my game save, load my last game save. And that was such a long stretch and such a pivotal, large story mission of the game that I kind of just was like, dude, I do not want to sit through 3 hours of scenes again and gameplay to get back to where I was, plus the additional X amount of hours beforehand too. So I decided to continue on with my save, and the story that game tells all throughout it is really, really, really interesting. I would really like to know if there is more, like, how much did I miss of that game? Because I tried to do a fairly decent amount of stuff. And when I play these types of games, there's definitely a balance, that a balance act of trying to go, okay, I would need to finish this game at some point, and I can't dump my entire life into it unless I'm absolutely having the greatest time of my life, which doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen a good chunk of the time. When I play these games, I get sucked into the world and I want to play as much as possible. Uh, but at some point, I go, I'm kind of over this. I want to finish this up so I can move on to the next thing. So I dumped about 47 and a half hours into Cyberpunk at the end of the month when I finished it up. And I had a blast. I really, really enjoyed Cyberpunk. Not just the greater grand story, which I know a lot of people had a huge issue with. A lot of people really did not like the story. And when I think about what the story actually is, I probably wouldn't have liked it too if someone told me what it was. But as I played through it for myself, I really latched onto the characters. I really latched onto being able to see someone else's point of view. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. Keanu Reeves is this character named Johnny Silverhand. And I did not realize what type of character he was going to play. I didn't even know if he was going to be a main character or not. And he definitely is a main character in the game. In the main storyline, basically your character, V, is like this mercenary, basically. They call him a mercenary. He's a gun for hire. And you do this job with your friend, it's not Johnny, Jackie Boy. And you do this job that goes sideways. And I'm sure I can't even remember if I talked about this on the last podcast or not. But, just indulge me, all right? Your job goes sideways. You get a front eye seat, like a front seat view to an assassination of basically like the world's, leader. And you see this as you're hidden. You're hidden trying to steal something, and you witness this murder. And you have to escape, and you are basically on the lam. And as you escape, Jackie dies, and you're carrying this what they call construct, an AI construct of a dude who lived in the past. And that dude who lived in the past is Johnny Silverhand, Keanu Reeves' character, who was part rock and roll star, like a musician, a famous musician, who became an activist, who then became, quote unquote, a terrorist. And so Johnny Silverhand has like this infamy around him. And you have him stuck in your brain. So you kind of see visions of him. You see him appear out of thin air, and he talks to you, and you and him have conversations in your mind. And he's technically there. And the whole thing is, he is slowly corrupting your brain because of the cyber psychosis and all this, cyberpunk type of technology going on in this world. He's basically taking over your brain, and you will become him at some point, and you will basically die, and he will live in your body unless you can figure out a way to fix it. And that's the main story of the game, is you trying to figure out how to get Johnny Silverhand out of your brain and separate him and you again. It's kind of hard because the chip got damaged, and so that's why he's leaking into your brain. And it's kind of a weird type of story where the little twists, the little personality changes become more and more apparent as you play the game. And it was really, really interesting to see all of that take place over the course of 47 hours. I loved playing this game. And it's not just the gameplay aspect, the open world, the gun shooting, the driving, not super interesting to me. It wasn't the main focal point. It was the storytelling. And like I said, a lot of people really bashed this game because of the technical issues and the stories. And just like The Witcher 3, the side stories are more enjoyable than the main story. And the main story is actually really good. There was definitely times where I was like, man, I can't wait to talk to this character who's a part of the main story. I can't wait to see what they think about what just happened with this character as I was going on patrol or doing a mission with them. You can call up characters that you can basically build relationships with characters and call them up at any time and have a conversation with them. And I did this so often that I started repeating dialogue fairly quickly, but it was there and it was pretty interesting to be able to see and remind myself, oh, that character exists. Oh, yeah, what's going on with them? Oh, nothing new because I haven't advanced the main story mission yet. Okay, great. But the characters that are there, the ones that I interacted with, were really, really memorable. And like I said, I wish I would have just played every single side story, but I was just so busy with work and life and farm stuff and everything else going on that I couldn't devote my entire life to this video game. And at some point, I just wanted to move on as well. So I didn't get to everything. I will never see everything in that game, and I'm okay with it because the experiences that I did have were so memorable. They were so enjoyable that, man, I loved it. And I don't want my memories tainted by, seeing this other stuff, like maybe a story beat play out differently because of the choice that I made versus what someone else made. My story really did make a huge impact on me. And that is something that I don't get with a lot of games that make that claim or promise. There's, games like Destiny, where the whole game is built around this idea of you're going to have your gun and it's going to tell a story and your gameplay experience is different than everyone else's. And that never pans out very well. It never comes to fruition the way that they say it's going to. But for Cyberpunk, like the way that I played my character in my game, it really made an impact on me where I have those memories and I don't really want to hear or see the other options that were available. Or maybe they were, or maybe they weren't. There's so many games that make the grand promise of your choices matter and everything that you do is personal. And it's I know I want to say Mass Effect, but I don't think that's a really good comparison. But you're making these choices throughout these games, and when you really boil it down, those choices don't really matter. It's a little line here versus a little line there, or that character shows up later on in the story versus where you never interact with them or see them again. Or you get a little email saying they died or saying, thanks for saving me. Those beats don't matter as much as far as I see it. When I play something like Cyberpunk, man, those moments and those choices that I made really felt like they made a difference. Not just in my character's life, but the lives of those other characters as well. There's a couple examples. One is, and here's a side quest that really stuck with me. You are basically become friends with this taxi company. Sounds weird, I know, but hold on. So this taxi company is run by an AI. His name is Delamain, and you could call him Del for short. So Del and you have this rapport from that job that went sideways, the one in the main stories. He basically gives you free service to the taxi. And you keep talking to him and you build up a rapport, and he knows you're a mercenary, and he basically hires you because something went wrong in his programming. he's got rogue taxis all around town. His taxi service, it's basically him multiplied, his personality multiplied throughout these taxis that go and pick up people and, serve them. But these few handful of taxis have gone off the grid and have become rogue AIs, and you have to round them up. So you go around this town, finding these rogue taxis, and some of them are really interesting. Some of them are duds. There's one where you have to basically get in and drive the car because he cannot make a decision. He's just neurotic. And so you talk to him and you say, hey, I'm going to drive you to where you can be picked up and serviced, and you're going to be okay. And he's like, oh, I like he's just sitting doing circles in a roundabout, and you have to pick him up because he cannot make the choice to turn out of the roundabout. That's one example. There's another rogue AI where it basically is GLaDOS from Portal, which is really weird. Like, I started noticing, I was like, hey, that voice sounds familiar. And it's actually the voice actress of GLaDOS from Portal. And she reprises her role, basically. They don't specifically state it. It's not like some shared multiverse or anything like that, but it basically is. She talks about you being a murderer and, wanting to kill you. And, oh, I can't remember if there's a cake is a lie joke or anything like that, but it's basically GLaDOS. Like, come on. And there's another one where, like, you go and you have to hike through, like, get out of the car, hike through this gigantic junkyard that reminded me of something of like Toy Story or why am I forgetting it? But The Brave Little Toaster, like this junkyard. And there's this lone taxi. You get in, and it's like this dark, ominous voice saying, I'm going to kill you if you ever talk to me again. Just leave me alone. And all this stuff. And you basically do all these taxi missions where you pick them up and you drop them off for Delamain. And then at the end, Delamain kind of goes haywire. And you have to go through the facility and basically reset his core. You can either make a choice of resetting it and hoping and integrating those rogue AIs, hoping that this doesn't happen again, or you can like basically do an EMP and Dell's personality in him, his mind will be erased so that there can be freedom for the rogue AIs. Like, I didn't really understand the choice that I was making, and I was just like, well, I think the greater good here would be to give freedom to the AIs, and Dell should probably have a backup somewhere or something. Like, he's going to get reset. He's going to, at some point, if he's a computer program, he will return to the state that he was in before all of this happened. So I'm going to wipe everything out and make the better choice, I believe. So that's what I did. And when that happens, you basically, again, he's like a friend, a character that you have a rapport with. And when you wipe it, he basically doesn't know who you are at all. And it's like, oh man, that kind of sucks. But I think this was a better choice. As the game keeps progressing, though, after that storyline has like finished up, that side quest is done, he dials you again. If you dial the taxi service instead of getting one of your cars or motorcycles that you already own, and you use the taxi service, which I never use taxis in those types of games. If you use those taxis, he strikes up a conversation with you. And he says, hey, V, so I was searching in some old archives, and I found a backup of, like your profile. And it basically tells him all the things that you and previous Dell, before he got wiped, did together, and your rapport and, your friendship that got built. And so he knows that you had a friendship before, and he seeks out to restore that friendship piece by piece. And you rebuild that friendship as you go through the game. every time you get in a taxi, he has another, hey, I'm starting to learn this about human history again, and I'm learning this and that, and what is love, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, whoa, that's really, really interesting. That is a really nuanced, unnecessary feature that they put into that side quest, which again, you finish that side quest. That's the end of the story as far as you are concerned. But if you continue to seek it out, there is more to it. And you slowly build that relationship back up over the course of the game. And it's like every time I finished a quest where I needed a car, I would hail that cab first to make sure that I'm not missing Dell. I'm not missing some of his, exposition, some of his story beats. That I've gotten all that I could from him. So I'd hail a cab, and if he didn't talk to me, if he just said, "Good morning, V, where would you like to go?" and you kind of drive around, and he says, enjoy your trip, have a pleasant trip, then I know, okay, I can actually just get out and get a faster car. But I would always start off by hailing that cab just to see if Dale wanted to talk, if he had some new new information for me, or if he learned something new. And it's just like those little tweaks like that really made the game so much more enjoyable. Same thing with other side quests. There's so many different side quests that I just was like, man, this went in a totally different direction than I thought it was going to. I thought I was going to end up here, and I ended up here. A lot of people use the phrase, oh, it goes places, but it doesn't really, they don't describe what happens at all. It's just a phrase and a buzzword that they want to say. That means it's something that you weren't expecting, which is really interesting when those games do that well. And I don't think a lot of games actually do that well. Yeah, a game can do something you weren't expecting because it's basically lying to you. I don't think this game lies to you. I think it really does take your expectations and says, hey, you were expecting this, but we're going to compound this with exterior information about these characters that you wouldn't pick up unless you really try to go seek them out. And I'm not a big fan of, extra work in games when I just want to play the mission. I should be able to see that. But if you take a little extra care, a little extra time, you can really dive deep into some of this stuff. There's another one where there is a basic, meetup with this cop, like this private investigator cop. And no, he's a cop. Yeah. And him and his partner hire you to do a job or whatever. And you do this very basic job. And you find out the cop's partner is corrupt. And kind of that's the end of it, right? But he calls you up later on and he says, hey, thanks for helping me out with that. I don't know. I still don't know what I'm going to do about my partner. I don't really think there is anything that I could do, but I kind of need your help for something else. And you follow that something else up. And oh my gosh, it goes in such a crazy direction. It totally was almost traumatizing in a way with the way this story plays out. So again, I like talking about this stuff. I am going to talk about and spoil some of that information. I try to keep it a little bit concise so that if someone does want to play through this stuff, not every single massive beat is really, explored or divulged. But I do want to talk about this stuff because I think it is really interesting. And hopefully, again, these are just a couple of side quests. There are definitely more that I didn't play, but these are the ones that stood out. So you go along with this, cop who basically his nephew gets kidnapped. And you are, basically trying to help him find out where the nephew is. Long story short, the kidnapper is basically holding him the kid and several other young boys hostage because he was basically like cyber I don't know what the word is. I can't remember what it is, but cyber kidnapping, basically. Like, he's luring these boys in with promises of candy and unicorns, like, oh, I'm so sorry that you are hurting, if you want to come over and talk, you can come over to my house and, I'll give you all the free candy you want and we can just talk about it. And I'm here, your friend. And it's like, man, that really like just opened my eyes to, that type of actual real life issue in a video game where people can prey on others who are really having a hard time, who don't know who to trust or just want someone to talk to. And those sicko scumbags can actually really prey on, someone like that. A weaker mind, someone who just wants someone to talk to and they are vulnerable. And it was like, ooh, that kind of hit me in the heart there. Like I understand, where people can just be very, very receptive and vulnerable to those types of, flirty words, those flowery words where they just are saying the right thing at the right time to coerce these people to talking to complete strangers online or something. So he basically gets kidnapped and you find the dude who did it. But the dude who did it is actually in a coma now because he got got pulled over, found out, and he's basically a John Doe. No one knows his name. And you do this cyber sleuthing of hacking the computers and emails and all this stuff and doing IP traces. And you basically end up finding where the dude is and where he's keeping the nephew. And it's this farm that is like this drug, a front for a drug. And he's basically holding these boys captive and torturing them and drugging them. And it is wild. It is like, oh my gosh, I did not realize it was going to be this heavy of a story in this side story addition to the main side story of, the corrupted cop partner. You follow it up by having the cop partner, his nephew gets taken and he gets thrown off the force and he becomes a PI and he hires you to do, help him with the kidnapping. Man, that is what going places means to me. And I hate that phrase because, like I said, so many people just use it as a filler word. Oh, this game goes places. No, it really goes into a different direction of making you think it's going to be this very simple cop bribes, officials to move up the ladder and becomes a fat cat. And then it changes directions into this whole really deep and serious story about kidnapping and cyberbullying and all this other crap. And it is just like, whoa, I did not expect that. And I came away from that story at like 2-3 o'clock in the morning going, I hope I don't have nightmares. I hope I don't freak out in the middle of the night. This is heavy stuff. And yeah, the video game is mature but dude, it's a video game. I was not expecting that type of philosophy to be dumped on me and like the weighing of these pretty heavy issues on my heart for that game. And it's not saying it's a bad thing either. I really, really enjoyed it and it made me come to some realizations about that type of, those issues in real life. And it's like, man, I have a nephew. I would never want him to, be in that position where he feels like he needs to talk to strangers online instead of his, uncle or aunt or mom or dad or brother or sister, anyone who he knows would never hurt them. It was really intense. It was really intense and I loved it. I loved every single moment of that story. As sickening as some of it is, because it is those types of heavy issues, as disturbing as it is at some points, as heartbreaking as it is. Like, it is really, really evocative of what video games can do, and why video games are my favorite thing in the world. Because it's like, man, a movie can't do that to you because you're not playing as the character. You're not experiencing the same things. You can't go out of your way to, you know, get more information. It's just what is presented to you on the screen. But with a video game, and I'll talk about this in a moment, especially VR, man, you can just experience it you can experience the same type of story in a much more profound and deeper way in a video game. And that takes me into what I was just about to say, VR. So another reason why I wanted to start playing this game when I did is because there's this guy, his name is Luke Ross, and he does VR mods on Patreon. And I'm very wary of supporting people on Patreon because it is one, when I see them, I'm usually late to the party. I'm usually one of those people where I hear about it and the dude's already pretty famous. So this dude, it makes like, I think it was like $20,000 a month making VR mods. 20 grand a month just modding, like writing some code for other released video games. So he's not doing, he's not building his own video games. He's not employed anywhere. He's just doing mods on his own, and he makes a pretty good chunk of money per month doing it all on his own. So he doesn't need my $10 a month as well. So I'm usually wary about that. And then also, like I said, there, you don't know who to trust online and stuff like that. So I'm cautious about Patreons. Are they going to deliver in that month of my $20 or $10? What am I really getting? Is it just pre-access or is it full access? Does my voice matter? Am I getting just the mod? Why can't I just pay for the mod and blah, blah, blah? So I decided, since it was our Couch Money Game of the Month, I wanted to check out the VR. And I was watching these videos of the VR from other, people, other YouTubers who got early access to it, and basically run PR for the dude, and again, this is why I'm always wary of that stuff, because that seems like just straight up paid for, promotions. And, I don't trust most people's opinions on stuff, especially if they get stuff for free. Ever. If you got it for free, I don't value your opinion very much at all. And you have to be really reputable with some of that stuff. So that's only why I subscribe to X amount of people online. That's why I only pay attention to X number of people and specific people in general, because you are just fishing for free stuff for most people. So I did the research. I kind of looked at what this mod was going to do, and I noticed that everyone was basically saying it's cool, but it's not great, and it's super resource heavy. And I did not have I was rocking a 1080 Ti up until just a couple months ago. 1080 Ti is a good card, but it is nowhere near the best card anymore. And especially for VR, it is underpowered at some point. So I was like, man, I need to get a graphics card before I jump into VR in this game. Luckily, I was able to get my hands on a graphics card for the first time in decades, what it felt like. I bought the 1080 Ti, I think in 2017, 2018 maybe, I can't remember. But I do know that I was waiting for when the 20X series of cards, the 2080, 2090, 2070s were coming out. RTX was new, and it was like, oh, RTX, that sounds pretty interesting. But I was just like, yeah, RTX, I don't really, I have a 1080 Ti and I'll just wait. And so I was waiting for the 300 series, and the pandemic happened and all that, and the shortage of cards, you couldn't get them. And so I waited and waited, and then the shortage of cards really just skyrocketed the prices. And I was like, I'm not paying scalper prices for a card that's retailing for $400. I think it was like $500 for the card I wanted retail, and it was selling online for like $1,200. I'm like, screw that. I'm not paying double, triple prices. So I sat and waited, biding my time, and it was really difficult, but I finally was able to get a 3070 Ti. And it made a really, really big difference in not just the core gameplay, but the VR aspect. And VR is really fun, especially in certain cases. Like when you are driving, some of those cars have these like Titanfall type of windshields. And it was like, dude, this is really, really cool. So I wanted to play around with that. And like, there's another vehicle, this tank that you play around with that, again, has that Titanfall type of clear LCD screen that's mirroring everything that you're seeing outside. And it was so interesting to play through. I was like, dude, I want to do VR. And same thing with like the VR, like, what do they call it? It's not Dreamscapes, it's Brain Dance. The brain dances, which are like their cool techie feature where you're basically in detective mode and you're playing forward and back and scanning rooms and all this. I want to do that in VR too. So VR is really, really cool. The performance is not great. I think it was a solid 75 hertz, which is like the I think 72 hertz is like the bare minimum. I think it dipped into the 45s at some point in certain aspects and cases, and even just the game itself performed not the best at times. So it was definitely something where I had to temper my expectations, but they were exceeded. My expectations were exceeded in not just the VR, but the game itself. And then there's this whole other aspect of the game, which is you hunt down these psychos who have what is called cyberpsychosis. And they got they were really hard, but they were, again, really interesting. The missions themselves were built in such a way that it kept wanting me to move forward with them. Very rarely did I ever go, I'm done. I want to stop. I want to get out of this mission. I want to go do something else. Every time I started a mission, I finished the mission going, oh my gosh, that was so cool. I can't wait to see what's next. And when a game does that, oh man, it's a joy to play video games that do that. Again, when you listen to people talk about movies, there's so many times where someone says, that movie was too long. Oh my gosh, that movie was so long. It was 2.5 hours. I'm like, dude, I just sat down for 5.5 hours and just barreled through this 1 or 2 story missions. And I don't want to go to bed. I want to keep playing. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. I want to stay up and continue. Like, you have to drag me kicking and screaming to bed almost. Like, that is what I love about video games, is they can do that stuff that most movies don't know how to do at all. Like there's so many people, so many critics where they go, that movie was so long. It was too long. It was 20 minutes too long. I want a nice tight 80-minute movie. Like, that sounds horrible. You can't get, stories across in a good way in that short amount of time. Or they're just, again, there's so many times I watched a lot of movies over the last like week and a half because my wife was out of town, and I was crammed with work. So in the scope of, I teach classes, and these classes are 3 to 4, or sometimes 5 days long. I taught 3 classes in the span of 8 days, and I was just like, dude, I cannot put any energy into video games right now. I can't. these classes I teach and I stream, for 8 hours straight. And I'm talking like I'm talking now for 8 hours. If you think me doing this podcast at like an hour and a half is long, think about that for, 5, 6 times as long in a single day. And I'm doing it day in, day out. Like, they take a lot of energy out of me for, being as animated as I am on screen and, getting across all this information to the people that I teach on a regular basis, day in and day out. Like, I just didn't want to play video games at all last week. So I watched a bunch of movies. I watched the new Chip and Dale's movie, which was horrible. I hated it with a burning passion. And if other people liked it, that's fine. I'm really tired of the meta commentary, and it's the satire is done very mean spiritedly. It's this modern apathetic take on, and it's so weird too. Like, it is straight up ripping off the style of Roger Rabbit with modern technology, but it's done in such a mean-spirited way. Like, Chip and Dale were best friends, and their cartoon show that was animated was actually is shot live, and they live in a world with humans and interact with humans like it's an everyday occurrence. Again, like Roger Rabbit and the Toons and interacting with humans. Like, these aren't even like, oh, Toons are a lesser form. Like, they are straight up equals. Cartoons, either CGI or hand-drawn, are living, breathing, sentient characters and creatures alongside humans. They are 50-50 or equal. And that movie just made fun of itself in a way that I didn't really like. There's also random for no reason cameos like Stan Marsh from South Park or Ugly Sonic. And now I'm seeing all these Ugly Sonic Redeemed articles and, I love Ugly Sonic the entire time. And it's like, no, you didn't. You were the idiot who, literally wrote a petition to get Sonic changed. You are the reason why that company lost millions of dollars in contracts and stuff like that, is because you hated it that much. And now you're saying because it's in the self-referential movie that you love it, but it's an ironic love. And it's like, dude, I hate it. I really, really hated that movie. I think it did some stuff okay, but even the stuff that it did okay was not really worth talking about all that much. It was a big bummer of a movie. I was not expecting anything, but when I sat down and watched it, I did not want to finish it. And I finished it because I was so tired and bored and I didn't want to do anything else. I was like, I might as well. I watched a couple other things. I can't remember exactly what else I watched, but I finally watched the last 2 James Bond movies. I started off with No Time to Die, which is the last movie that just came out, I think in October of last year, which I had my father-in-law spoil the ending for me. And I was kind of bummed about that because I wanted to see it. Even though I know Spectre, the last one, was not well received. I know a lot of people hated that and they said it was the worst one. But then I forgot how much people hated this new one. And there's good reasons for it, for sure. And I'll get into that in a second. But I started off watching No Time to Die. And I went, after the intro, I was like, who is this character? What's going on? And I went, oh crap, that's right, Spectre. I never actually watched Spectre. So I stopped and I went to Spectre and I watched Spectre, and it took me a couple days to get through because of, my wife got back home and I still had to work and do other stuff. So I would watch it at night for 45 minutes or something like that and go, oh, okay, I'll just watch this instead. And I got through that movie and I went, I didn't mind it. I didn't think it was terrible. It wasn't great, but it was not the end all be all worst thing of all time ever that I was led to believe by people online, which is why I never listen to people online. I never really take what they say seriously because the vast majority of people have no idea what they're talking about. Go watch a review of a movie that just came out, and the people say all the same things. They say all the same things in the same exact way, which tells you exactly that they're just pulling from other people's reviews. They're just saying the same thing because they saw someone else say it. And it's like, oh, I don't want to listen to them anymore. So what I did was basically I watched Spectre after I started No Time to Die. I finished Spectre and I went back to No Time to Die and went, oh, okay, that's why. It was really interesting because the intro to No Time to Die is about one of the main girls. Can't remember her name, but the main Bond girl for the movie. She tells this story in Spectre about how a guy came to her house and murdered her mother, and she ran away from him. And she shot him with her father's gun that was hidden under the sink. Like, kind of just not a really big like story beat moment, but a throwaway line that they took in Spectre and repurposed that as the intro for No Time to Die. And I picked up on that because I saw the intro first and then heard that dialogue scene and saw that scene in Spectre and went, oh, that's where they got that from. Okay, cool. And it was really interesting. It's kind of weird because No Time to Die has two intros. It has that intro, which is like the girl as a young child, and then they fast forward to Bond and her, vacationing in a foreign city, and then stuff happens. And I stopped at the intro when the credits kick in, and I think it's like 35 minutes into that movie of like a 2 hour and 48-minute movie. And I watched the rest of the movie and I did not like it very much, but it wasn't the worst thing. Again, not the worst thing for what it was. And I kind of say that not meaning exactly for what it was, because you think about a James Bond movie, a very specific style of movie comes to mind. An action movie that has really good cinematography with cars. I'm talking modern Bond at this point too. Really good, interesting cinematography, crazy action, and suave characters, interesting, gimmicky type of villains, and women, eye candy. So you have all of those things going on in a James Bond movie. And I talk with my friends all the time. I loved James Bond as a kid. I loved the James Bond series. I loved watching all those classic movies. When GoldenEye came out, I loved it. The video game came out, I loved it even more. I read the novel of Tomorrow Never Dies before or after the movie came out. Like, I was obsessed with James Bond at a point. I watched all the movies on VHS. Yeah, VHS. James Bond movies, renting them from Blockbuster. My friend Andrew and I would always rent James Bond movies and we would watch them. And so, I love James Bond, but at some point the Mission Impossible series became the new James Bond. It had cooler tech, and that was another thing. That's another thing you come to James Bond movies for. It's the technology. Like, oh, what does Q have for James Bond now? What's the new, car, like the BMW, BMW 5 Series, I think it was, for, was it Tomorrow Never Dies, I think? Because GoldenEye was a little bit before that. But I think the next one, Tomorrow Never Dies, was the one where they introduced the BMW as the James Bond car that's not the Aston Martin. So I love James Bond, and I watched this movie and I went, this really isn't a James Bond movie. This is just a straight up modern action movie with James Bond as a character, but the James Bond as a character is not really the character that we've all fallen in love with over time. But I will say, playing devil's avocado, that the modern interpretation of Bond, where they wanted to do their own thing, where they took it to the extreme, where they took the character of Bond and gave him an overarching storyline where it is not continuous. In those older versions, and they made it continuous. He has a relation with Vesper. He has a relation with this other character, and he falls in love with her and has a family and blah, 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 all this stuff until the very end. Spoiler alert, all right, for over No Time to Die, which was the last Daniel Craig movie. For the next, 15 seconds. This is what was spoiled to me from my father-in-law before I saw the movie. James Bond dies at the end. And it's like, really? You're going to kill off the character? That feels like a very modern take on, these aging action stars and modern Hollywood, which wants to change it. And there's definitely a very, very political based movement in this movie where reshoots had to happen because it tested so poorly with the audience because of how woke the movie got in certain aspects, that it was trimmed down to a 2 hour and 48 minutes. It was reshot in certain aspects because it was so poorly received by how bad it was written, how obvious the political agenda was in it, and all that extra stuff that I'm not going to go into because I don't want to. I don't think it's necessary, and I don't get political. But there's definitely those moments where I just was like rolling my eyes going, oh, brother, of course. And then they just kill off all these characters and they make these stupid things where they are using Blofeld, right? They're using a James Bond character from those previous incarnations and using him and modernizing him and giving him a twist that they didn't really need. All this extra stuff to basically say the movie was entertaining without the political stuff. The political stuff, the agenda stuff, I really started, it soured me on the movie. But that in and of itself is where I can draw the line and go, I can watch the rest of this and still be entertained. I have issues with the agendas that they're pushing in the movie, but I did not hate it overall. But man, it is just like Daniel Craig already said he did not want to do another James Bond movie. And he said, they have to pay me a lot of money to make me be James Bond again. And then they did. So his heart's not in it. You know that he's doing it for the paycheck. And boy, oh boy, does it show. All this stuff. But there is like a 20 minute scene in that movie where they're in Cuba. And it changes from modern day Netflix action movie to a James Bond movie. There is the suaveness. There is the cutesy one-liners that are a little tongue-in-cheek and a little eye-rolly, but nothing too egregious. There is the sexy women. There is the cars. There is the action. There is some of the over-the-top action where it's not crazy, but it is still entertaining. It felt like a James Bond movie. And it was like, oh boy. And that's kind of buried in the beginning-ish part of that movie around, I'd say, maybe a third of the way into the movie. That's where it happens. So you assume the rest of the movie is going to be like that, and it doesn't. It gets back into that Netflix basic category. And it was interesting to be able to watch that and go, okay, that's why. That's why people talked about this movie the way that they talked about it. And I totally understand it, and I agree with them for the most part. I don't think it was the worst movie I've ever seen my entire life, but I would never watch it again. And I would never want other people to watch the full thing. I don't think it's necessary. If you want to see the ending, I definitely thought Spectre was way better. But it's a bummer James Bond went out like the way it did for that series because, man, remember when Casino Royale came out and people lost their minds over that movie. I had my group of pastors over to my house and we watched that movie on Blu-ray. Like, people love that movie. And I agree. I think it is a spectacular movie. And remember how they followed it up with Quantum of Solace and how most people absolutely hated that movie? And then they came out with Skyfall and they loved it. And then they came out with Spectre and hated it. And then they came out with No Time to Die and they absolutely hated it even more than Spectre and Quantum of Solace. I literally saw a review the other day saying, I wish we got another Quantum of Solace instead of No Time to Die. Like, that is how absolutely horrible that series is regarded now, because people hate it so much. And like I said, I agree with some of these sentiments. I agree with the reasoning behind the hatred. I don't hate it personally. I think it is ridiculous that they made it the way that they did and they changed certain aspects. Like I said, I just don't think it's a James Bond movie, really. It really is not at that point. And I really, really, really hope that the creators, the IP holders of James Bond, because there's a whole documentary just on the IP of James Bond, not James Bond as a movie or character, but the actual litigation and who owns what about James Bond. There's a whole documentary about that, and that was years ago. That was like 2014. Maybe even earlier, 2011, 2012, that I watched it on Netflix. They don't have it on there anymore, but man, it is really interesting. I hope that those creators get, their acts together and really understand, like, James Bond is a cool, special, character and world that you can make really fun movies out of. And if you don't push personal and political agendas, you don't make it something that it's not, and you stick to the heart and soul of the character itself, I think you can make a lot of movies and make a lot of money on that, and make a lot of people happy and entertain a lot of people, which is what this is, right? It's entertainment. Come on. So I watched that. What else did I watch? I watched a few other things I don't really want to talk about. It's not really worth it. I mainly wanted to do a podcast for two reasons. One is I want to do this podcast, and I just haven't done it in the last month and a half or so because I've been so busy with actual work. And I haven't played a whole lot. I played those 3 games that I talked about. Oh, I didn't talk about 3 games. I only talked about 2. Ooh. Okay, so let me finish up with this. Let me just give you a little teaser because I haven't finished it or anywhere near it, really. I've just basically started it. Sniper Elite 5 came out just last week, just several days ago. And I played the other Sniper Elite games a few years ago, and I loved them. I think they are fantastic games. This new game, Sniper Elite 5, takes it in a more interesting direction and also a little bit of a different direction, while still staying true to the actual gameplay of Sniper Elite of being a sniper in World War II. The story so far, so I've only gotten through one mission, but I've spent about 3 hours playing through. I don't think it might be, I need to look at the time. It might be around 2 hours, but I've spent at least 2 hours in the first mission alone. And oh man, it is fun. I'm having a blast with it. It is hard though. They have changed that game to the point where it is much more difficult than it was before. The other ones I definitely did have difficulty, but not on the literal starting mission. Oh man, it is rough. You got to really be on your guard on some of that stuff and really take it seriously. It is part simulation sniper mode and then part, action game. And it is really, really fun. I love it and I cannot wait to play more of it. So I'm going to go play more of it tonight and hopefully I can record something in the next week or two about it. And so stay tuned for the next podcast, because I'll talk way more about Sniper Elite 5, because like I said, I've only gotten through the first mission. But what I've played is really, really fun and enjoyable. It is one of those games that I pre-ordered because I saw it for a good price, and then a few days before it went on, before it came out, they were like, "Oh, it's going to be on Game Pass too," and I went, "All right, cool. Well, you just saved me $40. Cancel my pre-order, and I'll just play it for free on Game Pass." So it's on Game Pass. Play it now. It's really fun. It's rad. I think today's our last day of the voting for the next game of the month for our Couch Money Discord. Again, I want to plug that in case you want to join in and have some fun conversations with some really down-to-earth fun people. I really enjoy the conversations we have about video games, and like I said, old video game websites like Giant Bomb before they got ruined. And we are voting on June's game of the month, and voting ends in just a few hours from now. And I think the game of the month is either going to be Tunic, the Dark Souls style type of game with a cute little fox and cell shading graphics that came out right along Elden Ring, and basically just got destroyed because Elden Ring was so much bigger in every single aspect. But that game, I played a couple hours of it when it first came out, and dude, that game is definitely worth playing. I just don't know if I want to play another Dark Souls style game. Or Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. That's also on Game Pass, and it is, they just released a little teaser announcement for the new one that comes out next year, the sequel to it. But that is also a very stylized Dark Souls style type of open world, Elden Ring-ish type game, and that is really fun as well. I highly, highly suggest it. So if you want to, I don't know if I even will have this up before the voting ends, but if you want to join the Discord, you can go to gameordie.net, and up at the top, I have a Discord link that you can join in and just participate if you want to, and say hi and, talk about fun stuff. Or you can just lurk and do that. That's also totally fine. I just want a place where people talk about video games. I have a Game or Die Discord channel or server, but it is literally me. And then, hey, whoever actually joined and went because of the website, like, thank you. I appreciate that. I think it was Jake. So if you're listening, Jake, thanks. I appreciate that. But I will get to start that actual up a little bit if other people join in. That's the thing, is it's me and Jake right now in that server. So I just kind of forwarded it to Couch Money because Couch Money actually has people talking. But I appreciate every single listener who listens to me ramble on and on about video games and movies and TV shows and all of that other fun stuff. It is, like I said, my passion in life. It is one of my favorite things to do. And I think video games are really, really something special. And when they do it well, man, it is like just highest of highs, when you experience video games like that. And when they do it poorly, it's also fun to talk about. So thanks very much for listening. I've been Ryan Moore, your host for the Game or Die podcast. You can always check out all the random weird articles of video games and movie reviews that I watch. So I did a movie review for Chip and Dale. You can go check that out. I did a review for whatever the last Cyberpunk. And you can go check out those reviews at gameordie.net. And remember, there is that Discord link in the chat, on the website as well. So final sign off. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next time.